My boss fired me by email while finalizing a landmark deal. It was a $53 million contract. I handled it from start to finish. I didn't say a word, just sent a document. The next day, $18 million landed in my account. I-28F. Never thought I'd be writing this, but here we are. 3 months ago, I was just another account manager at a mid-sized consulting firm. Today, I'm sitting in my new apartment overlooking the city, watching the sunset paint the sky orange while my bank account shows numbers I never dreamed possible. Let me start from the beginning. I've been working at this company for 4 years, climbing my way up from junior analyst to senior account manager. The company specialized in government contract consulting, and I had a knack for navigating the bureaucratic maze that scared off most of our competitors. My boss, let's call him Richard, was the kind of man who took credit for everything good and blamed others for everything bad. Classic corporate parasite, but I needed the job. The Riverside Municipal Infrastructure Project landed on my desk in January. $53 million to modernize the city's water treatment facilities. It was the biggest contract our firm had ever pursued, and Richard made it clear that landing this deal would make or break our quarterly numbers. What he didn't say, but I understood perfectly, was that success would be his triumph and failure would be my fault. I threw myself into the project like my life depended on it. 12-hour days became 14-hour days. I studied every regulation, memorized every requirement, and built relationships with key decision-makers at the municipal level. The technical specifications alone took me 3 weeks to master, but I knew this contract inside and out. The first breakthrough came in February when I discovered a loophole in the bidding requirements that our competitors had missed. While they were focused on the primary specifications, I noticed a subsection that allowed for alternative compliance methods. This meant we could offer a solution that was both cheaper and more efficient than the traditional approach. Richard barely looked up when I explained my findings. He told me to keep working and not bother him with details until I had something concrete. So I kept digging. March brought the real challenge. The municipal committee had concerns about our firm's capacity to handle such a large project. We were competing against companies 3 times our size with decades more experience. I spent weeks crafting presentations, preparing documentation, and scheduling meetings with committee members. The turning point came during a late-night session in April. I was reviewing the contract terms for the 100th time when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Buried in the fine print was a clause that could potentially void the entire contract if not properly addressed. None of our competitors had caught it, and even our legal team had missed it during their initial review. I spent the next 2 days crafting a solution that not only addressed the problematic clause but turned it into a competitive advantage. By restructuring our proposal to include additional oversight mechanisms, we could actually increase our profit margin while providing better service guarantees. Richard finally paid attention when I presented this discovery. He called it brilliant, revolutionary, a game changer. For the first time in months, he seemed genuinely excited about something other than his golf handicap. He told me to finalize everything and prepare for the contract signing. The next few weeks were a blur of final negotiations, document reviews, and stakeholder meetings. I was practically living at the office, surviving on coffee and determination. My personal life had evaporated months ago, but I told myself it would be worth it when we landed the contract. The municipal committee scheduled the final decision meeting for May 15th. I had prepared every possible scenario, anticipated every question, and rehearsed every presentation until I could deliver it in my sleep. The night before the meeting, I stayed at the office until 3 a.m., making final adjustments to our proposal. The meeting went perfectly. The committee was impressed with our innovative approach, our attention to detail, and our comprehensive understanding of their needs. They asked tough questions, but I had answers for everything. By the end of the presentation, I could see approval in their eyes. The committee chair told us they would make their decision within 48 hours. I left that meeting knowing we had won. 2 days later, the call came. $53 million. The biggest contract in our company's history. I had done it. I was in my cubicle, updating the final paperwork, when my phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was Richard, and the subject line read, "Employment termination, effective immediately." I stared at the screen, certain I was hallucinating from exhaustion. The email was brief and cold. Due to restructuring and budget constraints, my position was being eliminated. My access to company systems would be revoked within the hour. I was to clear out my desk and leave the premises by end of business day. No phone call. No meeting. No explanation beyond corporate buzzwords that meant nothing. I sat there for 10 minutes, reading and rereading the email. Around me, my colleagues went about their normal routines, unaware that the person who had just secured their biggest payday was being thrown out like garbage. The rage came slowly, building from a cold knot in my stomach to a burning fury that made my hands shake. 4 years of loyalty. 6 months of 16-hour days. A $53 million victory. And this was my reward. I started packing my personal items, my mind racing. Richard would present the contract signing as his personal achievement. He would probably get a promotion, maybe even a partnership. The story would become legend around the office, how Richard single-handedly landed the biggest deal in company history. That's when I remembered the document. During my deep dive into the contract specifications, I had discovered something interesting about the payment structure. The contract included provisions for consultant bonuses tied to specific performance metrics. These bonuses were separate from the main contract and could be assigned to individual consultants rather than the company, provided the proper paperwork was filed. I had prepared the documentation months ago, intending to discuss it with Richard once the contract was finalized. The bonus structure could potentially yield millions in additional revenue, but it required careful handling to ensure compliance with municipal regulations. The paperwork was still in my desk drawer, unsigned and unfiled. I pulled out the documents and reviewed them one more time. Everything was in order. The bonus structure was legitimate, the paperwork was correct, and the deadline for filing was still 3 days away. According to the contract terms, whoever filed the paperwork first would be designated as the primary consultant for bonus purposes. I made my decision. Instead of heading to HR to turn in my badge, I walked to the municipal building. The same building where I had spent countless hours over the past months, building relationships and understanding the system. The same building where everyone knew me as the lead consultant on the Riverside project. The filing process took less than an hour. The municipal clerk, someone I had worked with extensively during the contract negotiations, processed the paperwork without question. As far as she was concerned, I was still the primary consultant on the project, and this was just another administrative task. I walked out of that building with a receipt showing that the bonus designation paperwork had been properly filed and accepted. The next morning, I woke up to a phone call from my bank. There had been a large deposit to my account, and they wanted to verify that I was expecting it. $18 million. The first installment of the consultant bonus, paid directly to me as the designated primary consultant. I told them yes, I was expecting it. The second call came an hour later. Richard, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. He demanded to know what I had done, threatened legal action, called me every name in the book. I listened patiently until he ran out of steam. Then I explained the situation calmly and professionally. The bonus structure was part of the original contract. The paperwork had been filed correctly and on time. Everything was completely legal and above board. If he had questions about the process, he was welcome to contact the municipal legal department. The silence on the other end of the line was worth more than the $18 million. Update 1. The legal threats started within hours. Richard hired a law firm to challenge the bonus designation, claiming I had acted fraudulently by filing the paperwork after my termination. What he didn't realize was that I had been terminated by email at 2:47 p.m., but I had filed the paperwork at 1:15 p.m. the same day. The timestamps were clear and indisputable. His lawyers quickly realized they had no case. The contract was ironclad, the paperwork was legitimate, and the timing was perfect. More importantly, the municipal legal department confirmed that they had worked with me throughout the entire contract process and considered me the primary consultant on the project. Richard tried a different approach, claiming that any work I had done was company property and therefore the bonus should belong to Morrison and Associates. This argument fell apart when the municipal committee released a statement clarifying that they had worked exclusively with me throughout the negotiation process and had never had any meaningful interaction with Richard or other company representatives. The committee chair went on record stating that I was the reason they had chosen our proposal over the competition. My innovative solutions and deep understanding of their needs had been the deciding factors. As far as they were concerned, I was the consultant who deserved the bonus. Update 2. The story hit the local business news within a week. Former employee receives $18 million bonus after termination became a headline that spread across industry publications. The narrative was simple and compelling. A dedicated employee gets fired on the same day she secures a massive contract, only to receive an even bigger payday through her own foresight and preparation. Morrison and Associates tried to control the damage, but the story had already taken on a life of its own. Industry insiders began sharing their own stories about Richard's management style and the company's treatment of employees. Former colleagues reached out to congratulate me and share their own experiences of being undervalued and mistreated. The municipal committee, embarrassed by the negative publicity surrounding their contractor selection process, launched an internal review of Morrison and Associates' role in the project. They discovered that Richard had been taking credit for work he hadn't done and making promises he couldn't keep. The review concluded that the success of the project was entirely due to my efforts and expertise. 3 weeks after the story broke, Morrison and Associates lost 2 other major contracts when clients decided they didn't want to work with a company that treated its top performers so poorly. Richard was quietly asked to resign, though the company tried to frame it as a mutual decision to pursue other opportunities. Update 3. The second bonus payment arrived 2 months later. Another $12 million, bringing my total to $30 million. The contract included performance bonuses tied to project milestones, and the Riverside project was exceeding all expectations. I used part of the money to start my own consulting firm, focusing on municipal infrastructure projects. My first client was the city of Riverside, who hired me directly to oversee the implementation of the water treatment facility upgrades. They wanted to ensure that the person who had designed the solution would be there to see it through. Within 6 months, I had landed 3 more major contracts. Word spreads quickly in the municipal consulting world, and my reputation for innovative solutions and reliable delivery made me the go-to consultant for complex infrastructure projects. Richard tried to start his own firm as well, but his reputation had been permanently damaged. The industry is smaller than people think, and everyone knew the story of how he had fired his top performer on the day of their biggest victory. Potential clients weren't interested in working with someone who had such poor judgment and questionable ethics. I heard through mutual contacts that he eventually took a job with a small firm in another state, making a fraction of his previous salary. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had tried to eliminate me to take credit for my work, and instead had eliminated himself from the industry entirely. The final bonus payment came 6 months later, $8 million, bringing my total earnings from the Riverside project to $38 million. The project had been completed ahead of schedule and under budget, triggering the maximum performance bonus. I was sitting in my office, looking out at the city skyline, when I got the notification. The same city where I had once worked 14-hour days in a cramped cubicle, dreaming of recognition and fair compensation. Now I was running my own successful firm, working with clients who valued my expertise and treated me with respect. The best part wasn't the money, though that certainly didn't hurt. The best part was the knowledge that I had built something lasting. My consulting firm was growing, my reputation was solid, and I was working on projects that would benefit communities for decades to come. Richard had tried to steal my victory and claim my work as his own. Instead, he had given me the push I needed to realize my own potential and build something better than I had ever imagined possible. Sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding beyond your enemy's wildest dreams while they watch their own world crumble around them. Sometimes justice comes not from punishment, but from the natural consequences of poor decisions and bad character. I never sent Richard a thank you note for firing me, but maybe I should have. That email, meant to destroy my career, had instead launched me into a future I never could have achieved while working under his shadow. The Riverside Water Treatment Facility was completed last month, 6 months ahead of schedule and 15% under budget. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was attended by the mayor, the city council, and representatives from the state environmental agency. They asked me to speak about the project and the innovative solutions that had made it possible. Standing at that podium, looking out at the crowd of officials and community members, I thought about that email from Richard. The one that had seemed like the end of my world but had actually been the beginning of something much better. I never mentioned Morrison and Associates in my speech. I never mentioned Richard. I simply talked about the importance of innovation, dedication, and the satisfaction that comes from building something that will serve the community for generations. After the ceremony, the mayor approached me about another project. A $100 million transportation infrastructure upgrade that would transform the city's downtown area. She said they wanted someone they could trust, someone with a proven track record of delivering results. I told her I would be honored to submit a proposal. As I drove home that evening, I passed the building where Morrison and Associates used to have their offices. The space was empty now, with a for lease sign in the window. The company had folded 8 months after losing the Riverside contract, unable to recover from the reputation damage and client defections. I felt no satisfaction in their failure, no joy in Richard's downfall. Those emotions had faded long ago, replaced by focus on building something positive and meaningful. The best revenge, I had learned, wasn't destruction, it was creation. Building something so successful and fulfilling that your enemies became irrelevant footnotes in your story. The $38 million had given me financial freedom, but the real victory was the career I had built and the respect I had earned. Money could be lost or stolen, but reputation and expertise were assets that belonged to me alone. I pulled into the driveway of my new house, a modest place despite my newfound wealth. I had learned the value of staying grounded, of remembering where I came from and what really mattered. Success wasn't about the size of your bank account or the luxury of your possessions. It was about the impact you made and the legacy you left behind. The Riverside project would serve the community for 50 years or more. Thousands of families would have clean, safe water because of the work I had done. That was worth more than any amount of money, more valuable than any revenge against a petty boss who had tried to steal credit for work he couldn't have done himself. Richard had taught me an important lesson, though not the one he intended. He had shown me that loyalty to bad leaders was worthless, that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being forced to leave a situation that was holding you back. His email had been meant as a punishment, but it had become my liberation. His attempt to claim my work had backfired spectacularly, giving me the motivation and opportunity to claim something much bigger, my own future. I never did send him that thank you note, but maybe someday I will. After all, without his betrayal, I might still be sitting in that cramped cubicle, working 14-hour days for someone else's glory, never realizing what I was capable of achieving on my own. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. You just have to be patient enough to let the story play out.